Chapter 1. A holistic learning environment. Emily slammed the car door, ignoring Pete completely. "Just try a little, Emily. You have to make an effort too." She heard him, but determined to pretend she didn't. What would he know? He's not even my real dad. The whole situation was crap. Dreamfield High was the 4th school she'd been sent to in 2 years, and probably the last. They'll kick me out too, unless I save them the trouble and kill myself. She wandered towards her new classroom, kicking at any little stone on the path. No one spoke to her, but that was what she expected. She was black, after all, and they were all a bunch of racists. "Welcome, Emily. Did you have any trouble finding the classroom?" "Nah." Emily kept her head down. "Well, I'm glad." Why is she so cheerful? "And I'm glad you're here a little early. I hope you don't mind, but I thought it would be best if we talked about the elephant in the room right away." Elephant in the room? What is she talking about? Emily looked up at Miss Eitzel to try to understand and saw that she was smiling at her. Emily frowned back. "I know you haven't had a great time the last 2 years, but you're here now. Let's just begin afresh and do the best we can." "Whatever. I've got your basic educational history, but would you mind telling me a bit about yourself?" "Why?" "I like to know my students, what they like and dislike, what their weekend hobbies are, what really ticks them off, how best to encourage them. I need to know if you're struggling with something." "Why should you care?" "I could say it's my job to care, and it is, but it's more than that. You've got a whole life history behind you that will affect the way you learn, but also the way you feel and how you cope with school and life in general. It is my job to care, but it's also my privilege to care, and if I can, I want to be able to support you through tough times. I'm not a charity case." "I'm not a charity worker," the teacher smiled. Emily shook her head and rolled her eyes. "Whatever. I like to celebrate with you too when you do something really well." "Won't be much chance of that." "You might be surprised. Anyway, would you mind filling in my student questionnaire?" "Whatever floats your boat." Emily had thought the whole student profile thing was ridiculous, but after a few weeks she began to look forward to class home period. Miss Eitzel always talked to her about her favourite football team. Miss Eitzel seemed to enjoy the footy as much as Emily did, and she had to admit Miss Eitzel had spotted the depression. She hadn't called it that, of course. She'd used the word discouragement, but it was the same thing. Emily was tempted to tell her about her suicidal thoughts, but had kept that secret for the time. She still wasn't sure she could trust her that much. Miss Eitzel had talked to her foster parents, and Emily wasn't sure that she wanted those deepest, darkest thoughts shared with them. She would wait and see. Miss Eitzel wouldn't smile and reassure her this time. It wasn't the first schoolyard brawl she'd been in the middle of, and every other time she had been expelled. "Are you all right?" Emily snapped her head up. Miss Eitzel sounded concerned. "Were you hurt?" There were bruises, of course, but she didn't care about those. "I guess I'll be expelled again." "Did you start the fight?" "Depends. I threw the first punch." "Why?" I don't like being called a nigger." "Emily, I'm so sorry. That must have hurt you." Emily was chagrined to feel tears stinging her eyes. Bruises were nothing, but that word did hurt, and Miss Eitzel understood. It was time to talk, to really tell her what was happening inside. She had said she'd make sure she found the right person to help her. Emily believed she was as good as her word. Chapter 2. The Power of Relationship and Responsibility. Marie Eitzel let out a deep breath. "Create a positive learning environment," they said. She laughed to herself. It had sounded so easy in theory. She had studiously made up her student profiles, studied them and made use of the information as much as she could. She admitted that with Emily, possibly one of her most difficult students, knowing things about her had helped in the endeavour to build a respectful student-teacher relationship. But there were times when it wasn't just Emily's issues that brought the conflict. Trevor, Tony, and Celia could all be classified as... what could they be classified as? Attention seekers? wanting revenge. Whatever it was, they were like a bad chemical reaction when one of them would react with Emily, or even with each other. Marie seemed to remember something about a D student. She'd have to check her uni notes later, but was pretty sure it had something to do with a student who was unmanageable. Were these kids unmanageable? Not if I can help it, she said under her breath. As the next period was a free, Marie determined to consult those notes again and see if she could get some strategy on how to get this positive vibe going in the classroom. Oh, power. Now there's an idea. She ran her eyes down the list and admitted that coercive power was the most tempting. She could rule with an iron fist if push came to shove, but she dismissed it as a last resort. On the whole, most of the kids in her class seemed to extend the respect that came as a result of her position. Legitimate power. And so they should. I took years to get this master's degree. What are you mumbling about? The maths teacher, Bob, shared an office with her. He was a veteran in the teaching game. He could have been referred to as highly accomplished. I'm just going over the theories for creating a positive classroom. I'm liking coercive power. Bob laughed. Don't we all? Sometimes you need it. Really? Marie was surprised. They had impressed upon her the value of relationship or referent power. Only when issues of safety are involved or the whole class is about to break into a riot. Do you get that much? Marie asked. Not so much now, but I've brought the hammer down a time or two. I'm guessing you're trying to work towards building power through the influence of good relationships. Trying? It takes time. You have to lean on rewards and a bit of coercion to start until they get the idea of taking personal responsibility. Marie took a deep breath. It's a challenge. I think I've got some D students in my class. If you're talking Trevor, Celia and Tony, I think they're probably more B bordering C. Have you had trouble with them in the past? Name a staff member who hasn't. Trev and Tony are attention seekers, and Celia is bent on revenge. There's been a heap of out-of-class time put into them and their behavioural issues. They're nearly at the place where the evil eye can pull them into line. I assume you mean hint? Bob laughed. And if the hint fails? Have them stay after class for a chat. I believe the theoretical word is discussion. The important thing is to ask the right questions. Try to get them to think about how their behaviour is impacting their learning and the learning of others. Oh, there goes the bell. Time to face the lions in their den. Marie gathered her things and got up to leave. Thanks for your help, Bob. Pleasure. Make sure you talk these things through, though. Don't try to win the whole battle on your own, or you'll get overwhelmed and discouraged. Marie nodded and smiled as she left the office, ready for the next lesson. Chapter 3, Group Management Theory. Here we go. Emily frowned at Celia. Her tone of voice was obviously mocking. Here we go what? Emily asked. Miss Aitzell's hippie classroom meetings. They're such a load of crock. What do you mean? We all sit around and talk about our feelings. Celia put her hand on her heart and fluttered her eyelashes. Shut up, Celia, Trevor said. At least she shows some interest in how we feel about what happens in our class. Like it makes any difference. I don't get it, Emily said. It's disappointing to see some people in our class are making it difficult for us to have this meeting. Miss Aitzell's tone was firm, but she wasn't yelling, and she hadn't named anyone. Emily knew she meant her and Celia. She felt annoyed that she'd been distracted by Celia. She turned and put her finger to her lips to show Celia she meant to pay attention. She was interested to see what these hippie meetings were all about. We talked about classroom rights and responsibilities last year, but there are some new people in our class, and I thought it would be good to look at what we used last year and see if they are still in the best interests of everyone. Perhaps we need to make some changes or at least reaffirm our Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. Emily liked the sound of Miss Aitzell's voice. She had proved herself so far. When they dealt with the schoolyard brawling issue, she'd talked to her and asked her what sorts of things could be done to restore the situation. It had been a mutual exchange, not a grilling that ended in yet another expulsion. Emily had been the one to suggest a facilitated apology, and Ms. Eitzel had organised the school counsellor to work with everyone involved. "Who can tell us what rights we established last year?" Ms. Eitzel asked. "Not to be bullied," someone shouted out. "Yes, Annie." Ms. Eitzel pointed to a girl with her hand up. "Crawler," Celia said. "Everybody has the right to feel safe." Annie sounded like she was reciting. "Who would like to tell me what they think that means, the right to feel safe?" There was a jumble of voices and no one was particularly discernible. It is helpful when students indicate they have something to say by raising their hand. It makes a classroom meeting like this run more smoothly. Annie had her hand up again, and Emily glared at Celia, preempting another nasty comment. Emily raised her hand as well. "Yes, Emily?" "I don't feel safe when people call me names just because I'm Aboriginal." "Thank you for sharing that, Emily. Who thinks they understand what Emily is talking about?" "Yeah, well, she shouldn't punch people." Emily cringed. It was one of the other girls who had been calling her names during recess. "Lucette, we had a talk about that incident, didn't we?" Miss Eitzel wasn't going to let this get out of control. "Well, she should have been expelled." Lucette wasn't backing down. "I can see you're still upset about this. I think it might be good for us to arrange another meeting with the school counsellor to see what can be done to restore the situation. Are you happy to agree with that, Emily?" Emily nodded. "In the meantime, Emily, how do you feel now?" I feel scared." Emily kept her eyes down. She knew she'd done wrong lashing out physically in response to the bullying, and wondered if it could be restored. It never had been in the other schools. She hoped Miss Eitzel's group meetings would help. "Everybody has the right to feel safe physically and emotionally." Emily didn't lift her head to see who was speaking, but knew it was one of the boys who had a reputation for being more kind than most. He continued, "That means bullying, either physical or name-calling. It's something we should all try to fight against." "Who agrees with Ed's statement?" Miss Eitzel asked. Emily lifted her hand and her eyes to see the response. There were only a couple of students who didn't seem to agree, but then she doubted that they would agree with anything. "What was the other major category we discussed last year?" "We all have a right to get our work done, and that includes you." This time it was Trevor who had answered. Miss Eitzel smiled. "I said that a time or two last year, huh, Trevor?" "Like 6 million times?" "Well, you know what I mean, I guess." Chapter 4, Differentiation. Emily didn't like it when she was singled out for attention during class. It made her feel dumb. Shame job. So she usually didn't ask for help when she failed to understand instructions. "Emily, I notice you don't seem to be making any progress with the learning tasks I've set." Emily kept her eyes down and didn't answer her teacher. "Do you understand what it is you need to do?" Miss Eitzel's tone was kind, and at least she had waited until break period for having this discussion. "Not really." "I've only just received your student files from your last school, and they seem to contain some information about certain difficulties you have when approaching tasks. Are you aware of those challenges?" "It just means I'm stupid. I won't ever learn." "I don't think that's true. Perhaps you might not learn in the way that is common to a lot of students, but that doesn't mean you can't learn." Emily didn't really want to have this discussion. She wanted to do well, but she never had, even when she tried really hard. Written words were not her thing. Give her a wall and a paint can, and that was a different story. Emily realised that Miss Eitzel was still looking at her, waiting for a response. "Well, it's all Greek to me." "Well, there you see, you've just used a perfect idiom to sum up the situation." Emily frowned. Miss Eitzel laughed. "It means you're not stupid. You used a language skill well. From your notes, it appears you have an affective filter." Emily frowned again. "Well, that just simply means that you have an emotional block on learning, probably because you got behind when you were younger. Your family situation was a bit upset and disrupted your early learning?" Emily nodded. "And you feel embarrassed about that?" Emily nodded again. "It's all right to not understand things, and it's all right to ask questions. That's what learning is all about. Nobody else asks dumb questions. You'd be surprised how many others in your class come to me with questions about what they have to do. But just so you know, no question is dumb. If you don't understand, let me know, and we'll talk about finding a way so that you can understand. My writing is stupid too. Not stupid, just a bit behind. Besides, I have a feeling your artwork might be way above the average. There will be times when I will ask you to demonstrate your understanding in a visual format using your art skills, and you will find you know more than you think. Emily shook her head. I'm not sure. I am, Miss Ainsel said. Whatever we need to do, we will work out a way so that you can understand, and you will be able to show us that you understand. It will be all right. Chapter 5, An Inclusive Environment. This is so cool. Emily looked at the intruder and gave her a bit of a glare. Don't look at me like that, the girl said. This is supposed to be a space where we can feel like we belong. Yeah, but it's Koori Corner. Emily felt like she had to point out the obvious, like this girl hadn't seen the Aboriginal flag and posters of famous Aboriginal community leaders. The poster of Adam Goodes had been her contribution to the space. I'm Aboriginal too, the girl said. Emily did a double take. Blonde hair, blue eyes, fine features. Just because I don't have your beautiful dark skin doesn't mean I don't identify with my cultural heritage. I'm sorry, Emily said. I didn't guess. Yes, well, anyway, this is supposed to be about inclusiveness in our classroom. Even if my grandmother hadn't been Aboriginal, shouldn't mean I can't think this is cool, I guess. Besides, there are so many different cultures in our class, we all sort of need a bit of education on how to become, what did Miss Ainsel call it, culturally proficient. Competent too, I think, because when she said it, I thought to myself that we were all a bit incompetent culturally, at least. My name's Holly, by the way. Emily nodded. Do you think we are the only 2 Aboriginal kids in the class? Holly asked. Hard to tell. I thought I was the only one until you just spoke to me. Holly laughed. It's good though, this corner. She's gone to so much effort to display our heritage and things that make me feel like she really values our culture and stuff. It does make me feel better about being different. Different? What about those other girls who wear the headscarves? Imagine how they must feel. We're such an insensitive bunch. We probably haven't got a clue about their backgrounds. Though I heard my dad talk a whole lot of nonsense based on media hype and stereotypes. I think we might need a corner for each culture so that we can get a clue. There are only 4 corners in the room. Emily made the comment and Holly burst out laughing. You don't talk much, do you? Emily shrugged her shoulders. With Holly holding court, there wasn't much opportunity to talk. Anyway, I might suggest that to Miss Ainsel. I know how great I feel to see our flag and to see the apology acknowledged. I reckon we could at least construct an international corner, or 2. How many different cultures do you think there are represented in our class? Emily asked. Sudan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, China. I think there might even be a couple of Aussies here as well. We're Aussie, Emily said. Yeah, I know. The whole class is Aussie now. It's just we have to learn how to understand each other and try to make sure people feel welcome, especially those who fled their countries as refugees. We need to make sure they feel welcome. You know, it's not just about being welcome. What do you mean? Miss Ainsel is always making adjustments to the way she teaches so that those who don't speak English well can understand. That's true, when you think about it. How much trouble does she go to make sure that deaf kid has all the right equipment to be able to understand what's going on? I reckon some people would think it's easier just to dump the difficult ones in a special school. Well, it probably would be easier. That's not going to happen. Not here, with Miss Ainsel. Emily sat back in her comfy chair, the chair strategically placed in the Koori corner, and smiled. She was going to make it through school.